What is the meaning of a life that has been stripped of everything? Your home, your name, your family, even the clothes on your back. What is the meaning of a boulder pushed up a mountain only to watch it roll back down forever with no summit waiting at the top? What is the meaning of a universe that never once answers the question you cannot stop asking? In 1942, a psychiatrist named Viktor Frankl was arrested and sent to a concentration camp. He lost his parents, his brother, and his pregnant wife. He was stripped of his clothes, his name, his profession, and everything he had ever built. And yet, inside the camp, surrounded by starvation and death, Frankl noticed something strange. The prisoners who survived longest weren't always the strongest or the healthiest. Often, they were the ones who still had a reason to live. Decades earlier, a philosopher named Albert Camus had arrived at a darkest starting point, that life has no inherent meaning at all, and the only real philosophical question is whether that fact is a reason to keep living. And a generation before both of them, Friedrich Nietzsche had written a sentence that Frankl would later carry into the camps like a piece of armor. He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. 3 men, 3 different centuries, catastrophes, and conclusions. One question: when everything is stripped away, what actually keeps a person alive? Every generation asks some version of the same question. Usually when comfort runs out and suffering moves in. What is this all for? Why keep going? Frankl, Camus, and Nietzsche each answered from the middle of real crisis, not from a comfortable armchair. Nietzsche wrote as Europe's religious foundations were collapsing, trying to figure out how people could find meaning once God, in his famous phrase, was dead. Camus wrote in the shadow of 2 world wars and the rise of totalitarianism, confronting what he called the absurd, the collision between our hunger for meaning and a universe that offers none. And Frankl wrote from inside Auschwitz and Dachau, testing every philosophical theory about meaning against the most extreme conditions a human being can survive. What's remarkable is that these 3 men, approaching the same abyss from wildly different directions, kept arriving at overlapping answers. This video traces those answers, where they converge, where they split, and what they add up to when you put them side by side. Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, is really 2 books in one. The first half is a memoir of his time in the camps. The second half lays out the psychological framework he built from what he witnessed there, which he called logotherapy, therapy through meaning. Frankl's core observation was simple but radical. The prisoners were all suffering under, identical horror, yet they didn't respond to it identically. Some gave up almost immediately. Others, even while starving, found ways to hold on to something, a memory of a loved one, a task left unfinished, a hope for the future. Frankl noticed that those who survived the longest tended to be the ones who could answer a single question for themselves: what am I still living for? He describes one moment that became central to his entire philosophy: walking in the freezing dark on a forced march, exhausted and starving, and deliberately conjuring the image of his wife's face, speaking to her in his mind as though she were there. In that moment, he understood something that no philosophy book had ever fully taught him. The salvation of man is through love and in love. But Frankl's most important claim isn't that love or work or belief is the one true source of meaning. It's that meaning is radically individual. It cannot be handed to you, and it cannot be the same for every person or even the same for one person across their whole life. It has to be discovered over and over. Everyone has his own specific vocation or mission in life. Everyone must carry out a concrete assignment that demands fulfillment. Therein he cannot be replaced, nor can his life be repeated. And here is Frankl's most controversial, most quoted idea, that even suffering, when it cannot be avoided, can become meaningful, not because suffering is good, but because how a person carries unavoidable suffering is itself a final, irreducible freedom. He called this the last of the human freedoms, the one thing the camps could never take from a person, the ability to choose their attitude in any given given set of circumstances. Camus started from a much bleaker premise than Frankl. He didn't believe the universe had any meaning to discover, hidden or otherwise. In the myth of Sisyphus, he opens with what he considers the only serious philosophical question. There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Not because Camus was advocating for it, the opposite. He believed that once you honestly confront the fact that life has no built-in purpose, the only question left worth asking is whether it's still worth living anyway. Camus called the gap between our desperate need for meaning and the universe's total silence on the matter the absurd. We are meaning-seeking creatures thrown into a universe that offers no answers. And Camus thought most people spend their lives running from confrontation rather than facing it. His answer was not despair, though, it was defiant acceptance. He used the Greek myth of Sisyphus, condemned by the gods to roll a boulder up a mountain for eternity, only to watch it roll back down every time as his central image. Most people read that myth as a punishment. Camus read it as a mirror. Isn't this what all of us are doing, repeating the same tasks day after day toward no final destination? His conclusion, radical for its time, was that Sisyphus could be genuinely happy, not despite the absurdity of his task, but because he chose to embrace it fully, without illusion. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Where Frankl said meaning is something to be found, Camus essentially argued there's nothing out there to find. But that doesn't mean you're left with nothing. You're left with a decision to live fully, passionately and honestly in a universe that will never answer you back. Camus called this the struggle itself toward the heights, and he believed that struggle, chosen freely and faced without illusion, is enough. Both Frankl and Camus mirrors in very different ways, are answering a challenge that Nietzsche laid down decades before either of them wrote a word. Nietzsche watched the traditional sources of meaning in Western life, religion, inherited morality, cosmic purpose, begin to lose their grip, and he predicted correctly that the 20th century would be defined by the vacuum that was left behind. He called this coming crisis nihilism, and he believed it was the central danger of the modern age. Not that people would suffer, but that they would suffer for nothing they could name. Nietzsche's answer wasn't to restore the old sources of meaning. It was to insist that meaning must now be actively created, rather than passively inherited or discovered. This is the line Frankl carried into the camps, and it's worth sitting with for a moment. He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. Frankl used to say this sentence more than any textbook guided his entire clinical philosophy. It suggests something neither purely Frankl's position nor purely Camus's, that the why doesn't have to be cosmic or objectively true. It just has to be genuinely yours, strong enough to hold you upright when the how of your life turns unbearable. Nietzsche also gave language to something both later thinkers would build on directly, the idea that suffering itself could be transfigured, not eliminated, through the meaning a person assigns to it. That which does not kill us makes us stronger. It's a line that's been printed on so many gym walls. It's lost most of its weight, but in context it's closer to Frankl's logotherapy than most people realize. The claim that suffering, faced rather than avoided, can become raw material for a stronger, more deliberate self. It would be easy to flatten these three men into the same message. Suffering makes you stronger, find your why. But the differences matter, and they matter most in exactly the moments life gets hardest. Frankl believed meaning is out there to be discovered, almost as if the universe, or at least your own particular life, is asking something specific of you, and your job is to listen carefully enough to hear it. Camus rejected this outright. For him, there is no universe asking anything of anyone, and pretending otherwise is a comforting lie. Nietzsche split the difference in his own way. Meaning isn't discovered or handed down, but it isn't arbitrary either. It has to be created through struggle, through the discipline of imposing order and value onto a chaotic existence, through sheer force of will. This produces three genuinely different postures towards suffering. Frankl says, suffering can reveal meaning if you let it. Camus says, suffering reveals nothing, but how you carry it is your freedom and your revolt. Nietzsche says, suffering is the very material meaning is built from, whether you like it or not. And yet none of the three men end up in the same place as despair. That convergence from three completely different starting premises is worth taking seriously. It suggests that whatever meaning actually is, it may not depend on which philosophical framework is technically correct. It may depend on whether a person is willing to actively engage with their own suffering instead of numbing it, denying it, or running from it. Strip away the philosophical scaffolding, and all three men are converging on a similar, uncomfortable instruction. Stop waiting for meaning to be handed to you, and stop waiting for suffering to end before you start living. Frankl would ask what your life is asking of you right now, in this particular set of circumstances. Camus would ask whether you can embrace your daily boulder without needing a cosmic excuse to justify pushing it. Nietzsche would ask what you're actually building out of the difficulty you're currently facing. None of them promise the difficulty will end. Frankl lost almost everyone he loved and never got those years back. Camus never resolved the absurd. He insisted it can't be resolved, only faced. Nietzsche spent the last decade of his life in mental collapse and never saw the world adopt the philosophy he spent his life building. Meaning for all three of them was never a reward waiting at the end of suffering. It was something built inside it, without any guarantee. Frankl found his reason inside a place designed to strip every reason away. Camus found his freedom inside a universe that owed him none. Nietzsche found his strength inside a collapse he never fully recovered from. Perhaps meaning was never a destination any of them reached. It was the boulder itself, carried a little further up the mountain, one more time, by someone who chose to carry it anyway.